Okay, welcome to Maryland's Paint Shop. I'm about to give you a complete guide on how to paint liveries for DCS. You ready? Let's dive in. All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. The first thing that we need to talk about is what software that you need to have installed in order to create your liveries. There's not a lot, but first and foremost, you obviously need to have a graphic editor. I use Photoshop. Other people use GIMP because GIMP is free. I can only speak to Photoshop because that's what I use. So when you use Photoshop, you have to be able to export the files as a DDS file. Those are the files that the library are made of. So that's not a native export of Photoshop. So you have to have a secondary tool called NVIDIA Texture Tool Exporter. This is a free kind of plugin that gets integrated into Photoshop. So just scroll down to the bottom, click download for your operating system. Sorry, I use the Adobe Photoshop plugin, download that. That gets integrated into Photoshop, and then when you go to click Save As, you can choose DDS as your file type, and then that will create the file that the library needs. The two other things that you need is you need like a notepad editor, because all of the DDS files are pulled together in a Lua file, and the .lua file can be read by any notepad editor. I use Notepad++, another free software. I just like that better than just using straight old Windows Notepad. And the final thing that you need, which I believe is now pretty much integrated directly into Windows, is the ability to unzip a file or zip a file back up. So those are really like the four things if you're using Photoshop. So let's go ahead and talk about where you want to do your work from. And it's important, so the libraries, when you make them, are stored in your Save Games folder, but that's not where we want to work from, because we want to utilize a tool within DCS called Model Viewer so that you can make your changes to your library and then quickly see how those look in the Model Viewer, as opposed to loading into DCS every single time and looking at the change in game. So let's show you where those things are. All right, so we want to open up your Explorer. We want to go to where you have DCS installed. So for me, DCS is installed on my D drive. We go into DCS World, and then we have your folder bin MT. This is where Model Viewer is, right? So when you go into that, you can see here's your DCS, your main DCS game, DCS.exe. But if you keep scrolling down, you'll see modelviewer2.exe. And when you double click on that and wait for that to load, you'll see that the model comes up. And then you have over here on your right side all of the various libraries that you can see with that. So we can load this one. Some of these all look the same, so let's go ahead and pick Baltic Dragon. You can load that and see what that looks like. You can move the model around by just clicking on it with your mouse. If you right click, you can zoom in and out. This is really good if you are doing patterns like this that have to cross multiple DDS files. If you click on the scroll wheel and hold it, you can move the entire camera up and down the model and scroll in and out. So, all right, so that's Model Viewer. So how do we get our files in Model Viewer where it can see? So let's talk about real quick, where do you get templates? Where do you get libraries that you want to adjust, right? So there's really two things that I want to talk about when you're updating libraries. The first is if you find a library online that you like, but you just want to do some kind of customization to it. The easiest customization, we'll just start there, is say you have a library and you want to put your name on near the cockpit, right? You just want to update that library by adding something on top of it. We would download that library, make the change, look at it in Model Viewer. The other thing that you can do is if you have a full-blown template from Eagle Dynamics, the template gives you all of the various layers that can make up a library, and we're going to walk through both of those, okay? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to open up our web browser and go to DCS. Okay, so we're going to go right to the root folder of DCS. And in the downloads section, the two areas that we want to look at is texture templates, right? So here are the various templates that DCS has put out. Not every single aircraft is in here, so that's important to know, okay? You can see down here in the corner that it is going to be downloaded as a zip file. The more complex the file is, the larger it's going to be. These files can get big. They can get up into the gigabyte range. So just be aware of that you are going to need a hard drive with some decent space. But you play DCS, so I'm assuming you have a hard drive with decent space. The other place that you can look to get libraries is you go down to, again, downloads and then user files. And in the user file section, you can filter on skins, so that's your library. You can filter on any particular aircraft. But if we look at this is a great example, the Mirage 2000C. You can click on the screenshots. You can see, pictures of, this looks like Battlestar Galactica with Starbuck. That's pretty cool. So shout out to this guy for, who is this? Bungo. Shout out to Bungo for that. You can download this library and then add your name on top of that DDS file. All right. So we're going to pretend, we're going to go through that first step one, right? We're going to go and we're going to download a file and we're going to put our name on it. So if we go to Windows Explorer again, I downloaded it. So it's going to show up in my downloads folder. And I have a download here called Maryland F-16 Livery. All right. So I'm going to copy this. I like using shortcuts on the keyboard. So the shortcut for copy is Control-C. You can also right click on it and come down to copy. But honestly, learn your keyboard shortcuts. All right. And then paste is Control-V, or you can right click and go to paste. All right. So we are going to copy this. And the place that we want to do our work is actually in the root folder of DCS, right? So I have DCS installed on my D drive, DCS World. We want to go into the root folder of DCS World, core mods, okay? Aircraft. And then what is the aircraft we're working on? We're going to work on an F-16. Within the F-16 folder, we have the liveries folder. And then you have the particular version of that F-16. And look, here's all of the liveries for the F-16. They're all in zip folders with the exception of maybe the custom ones that I have been working on. So we're going to paste our library that we just downloaded in here. Again, Control-V. Okay, so now we have our library in here. The next thing we want to do is we want to extract this out of the zip file. So we're going to double click on it. You can use any program you want. Windows has native stuff. You could use WinZip. You can use WinRAR. I have WinRAR on here. So let's go ahead and extract this. Notice that the name of the folder we're extracting is called My Demo Library. Okay, so let's extract that. And it's important to note that it extracted as a folder called Maryland-F-16 Library, but My Demo Library sits inside of this. So what we need to do is look inside My Demo Library. You see all of the DDS files. We need to extract this to the root folder of what we're working on, right? So we're going to hit cut, come back up here, and then paste, Control-V. Now we got My Demo Library. We can delete the zip file, and we can come up here and delete the Maryland F-16 library because we now have My Demo Library in here. Okay, so now that we have this installed in this directory, let's go back to Model Viewer. And we are going to close this out and reopen it because I want it to go through and make sure that any new folders that we have installed in here are going to be a part of the library information. So we're going to close this. We are going to go back to the root folder DCS World, bin MT, and open up Model Viewer again. Model Viewer is going to load back up. It's going to load back up with the last model that you were working on. So it loaded up with the A10 because that's what we were on. So how do you change this out? We're going to go to File, Load Model, and you can see in the directory here that we're in the Aircraft A10 and Shape. So we're going to go up a parent directory. Now we're in A10, up another parent directory. Now we're in Aircraft. So we want to look for the F-16C, which is right here. Double click on that. Double click on Shapes. We're looking for the F-16C Block 50 EDM file. Okay, so this is the model file for the F-16, and we open that. And now you can see the F-16 model is in here, loaded with its default skin. If we come over to the various libraries associated with this, we want to make sure that we have selected the F-16C Block 50. And here are all of the libraries that you can look at for the F-16. And then we're looking for the name of our folder. Okay, not the name of the actual library in the Lua file. We're going to get to that. It's the name of the folder, and it was called My Demo Library, and here it is. Okay, My Demo Library. Select that, and then we're going to load that library. Okay, so this is a custom library that you could have downloaded off of the internet. We now have it in Model Viewer. Okay, so you can see that with this particular library, it already has some, some call signs on it. And let's say that we want to make additional modifications to this. All right, so we are going to open up that DDS file and modify it in Photoshop. So let me go back to where we had that stored. So again, remember we were in DCS, Core Mods, Aircraft, F-16, Liveries, the F-16 Block 50 folder, and that's where all of our libraries are. So we're going to double click on My Demo Library, and here are all of the DDS files that make up this particular library, as well as the Lua file that ties all of this together. So let's go ahead and look at modifying the name on the cockpit. So finding the particular DDS file that has the area of the aircraft that you want to modify, a lot of times you're just hunting through them all. You could just click on, say, main 1, Photoshop's going to open, and you're just looking to see, is this it? And look at that, nailed it on the first try. Okay, I actually was like, I didn't want to nail it on the first try. I was going to try to do the Block 50 kill, but I think that that's the tail fin. All right, so let's go back to, we're going to close out of the tail fin. Let's come back here. Okay, so this is the file that is the front of the F-16. So let's say that we want to remove Maryland and put in another call sign. So this is where I'm not getting into how you become proficient in your graphics tool editor, right? So in order to make good libraries, you have to be really proficient in Photoshop or GIMP or whatever it is, and that's not what this tutorial is about, all right? But I want to erase Maryland, and I'm going to put in another call sign. So in order to do that, I am going to... So this tool, I think it's called cloning, right? It's taking the spot at the bottom and basically writing over where I am at the top. And so you see, I'm going to go over this over here. Hold on. When I click here, you're going to see it's going to start writing what's down there again, right? So I don't want that. All right, so make another clone spot and get rid of this. Keep going. Okay, so now Maryland's gone. So now I want to add in a new title. So I'm going to do text, and I am going to make it say call sign Maryland. Okay, for the sake of simplicity, we'll just say, hey, that looks great. Okay, then we're going to go up, we're going to apply that change, go up to File, save a copy. Now we want to make sure that we are saving it as a DDS file, and we need to ensure that we are saving it as the same name as the file that we just edited. So I believe it is main1 FSJ. FSJ is Flight Sim Junkies. That's the group that I fly with. We're going to save that. It's going to say, do you want to overwrite this? Yes, we want to overwrite it. Then remember when we talked about the NVIDIA Texture Tool Exporter as a plugin, because we said we want to save it as a DDS file, now the plugin pops up and here's all the options that we have for it. Somebody in the comments section is going to tell you what is the best format to save it in. I always save it in BC7, and somebody will probably say that there's a better format. So go to the comments and listen to them. And if you know of the better formats, put it in the comments, all right? I don't actually really know which is the best format, but I always just choose BC7. So I'm going to click Save. Now that it's saved, if we go back to Model Viewer, we're going to come up to Tools, and we're going to click Reload Texture. And look, there it is, call sign Maryland. Okay? So that is the quick, dirty, easy way to make a modification to a library that you have downloaded off of the internet. Remember, all we can do when you download a library off of the internet is put things on top of that library. We don't have all of the various layers. You literally just have the one DDS file. Now you can create your own Photoshop file of it using that DDS file as your base, and you can make all of your layers on top of it that you want and then save it back out as a DDS file. Obviously you can do that, but you are starting with a flat file with that DCS file. So let's say that you wanted to take this new library and see it in DCS, all right? We need to look at the Lua file next. Okay, so we're gonna go back to the folder that we were just modifying, my demo library, and we wanna look at the Lua file. So again, I use Notepad++ for this, but you can also just use Notepad. So this library here is made up of all of these various files until you get down to here. So what I really want you to pay attention to is down at the bottom, the name of this library is called Maryland-F16 library. Now this name is what you're going to see in DCS when you load into an F16 and you go to pick your library. It is not going to be the name of the folder. Okay, now remember, when we're in the model viewer is looking for the name of the folder. It is not looking for the name that you have put in the Lua file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this file. I'm going to open up another tab, and I'm going to go to where I have DCS, my saved games folder. So I have a shortcut on my desktop. So Kevin, that's me, saved games, DCS. You want to go into your library section, libraries, F16. And then this is where you want to install or paste that folder, okay? So we are going to paste this. And you can see it's named here, my demo library. So let's go ahead and change that to Maryland F16 demo. Okay, so now that this is here, let's go ahead and open up DCS. Okay, we got DCS here, so let's go ahead and we want to just make a super quick mission so we can just see the library. So I'm just going to click Mission Editor, Create New Mission. The map doesn't matter. I'm going to throw an F16 on the map. Okay, A10, we're going to change this to the F16, block 50, and now we can go to where we choose our libraries for the game and scroll down until we find, what was it, Maryland F16 library. Okay? And you can see the modifications right there. I know it's small, but it does say call sign Maryland. And that's how you get it in game. Okay, we're out of DCS. I jumped back into their website. I go to downloads, texture templates. I'm going to download the F18 template because I believe it's only 2 files. All right, so we're going to click download. Okay, it's done downloading. It's 200 megabytes. So this one's not bad because it's only 2 files. So let's go to our downloads folder. Now I have my F18 template here. And let's go put this in the folder that I was telling you before, so that Model Viewer can see the stuff that we're working on quickly. So we have DCS World, Core Mods, Aircraft, F18, Liveries, the F-18C Hornet, and we're going to paste it here. And then we're going to extract it. Again, you see there's only 3 files in here, so extract. All right, so F-18C1 diff. This is a Photoshop file. Okay, now we're not in a DDS file. This is a Photoshop file now. And you know it's a Photoshop file because over here it has all of these layers associated with it. So when you're working with templates from DCS, one of the really great features of the template is they will typically have a mesh file at the beginning or at the top layer. And when you click on that, it shows you the grid. Love the grid, okay? You don't want to export with the grid on because obviously then you'll see the grid in your model. But if you look at the grid, I mean, now you can really see exactly what are the features of this, like that they're actually exporting into your model. The other thing is that they have layers in here like, love this, the dirt layer. So if you want your aircraft to look dingy and dirty, then you keep the dirt layer on. If you don't like it, you can turn off the dirt layer, and now you have a brand new off the assembly floor line jet with no shabbiness, right? They have a layer here called shabby, right? So we'll turn dirt back on. Then you can get down to the color section. They have a whole bunch of stuff in here, but what I really want to draw your attention to is at the very bottom, they have a layer called base. So if you wanted to change the entire color of the aircraft, all you'd have to do at this point is create a new layer. And let's say you wanted it to be red, just drop in a red base layer at the very, very bottom, and then all the other layers on top of it, continue to stack. And so now you have an F-18 that's going to be fire engine red. When you're done making your changes and, doing any customizations to it, just make sure that you come up to the top. If you have your mesh turned on, turn that off, and then do the same thing as before, save as, and then do it as a DDS file. So one of the things to note in this file is that there's, the template doesn't have the Lua file in it. It doesn't have any other DDS files. So what I would do in a situation like this is I would go look for another library file. So let's do the default library. Let's unzip that, right? And so you can see in here now, this is what DCS is looking for. A description, Lua, and then the 2 DDS files. So let's go ahead and extract that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this content and move it over to my template file. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to come into this description.lua and change this name from default library to Maryland F-18 demo library. Okay, we're going to save that. And now when you go into DCS, remember this is what you're going to see in DCS, not what you're going to see in Model Viewer. So when you go into Model Viewer, as you recall, it is the name of the file is going to be the name of the folder. So it's going to be F18C lot 20 template, right? So let's go ahead and come in here, and we are going to save this as a DDS file, and BC7, and click Save. So now let's go back into Model Viewer, let's see, model viewer. We're going to go to my default DCS world, bin MT, scroll past the DCS, and then go to model viewer 2. Now, when this loads up, we want to change the model from the F16 over to the F18. So remember, we go to File, Load Model. We're going to get out of the directory for the F16. So up a parent to F16, up a parent to aircraft. Now we're looking for the F18. So FA18C, double click that. Double click Shapes, okay, because we want to load the model. And we're looking at the F18C EDM. Here we are. All right, so now we're in the F18C Hornet, and here's all the liveries associated with this one. So we can load up the Canadian one. We could load up the one that I have built for the Flight Sim Junkies, which is my flight group. And here's the one that we just worked on, the F18C Lot 20 template. Remember, this is the name of the folder, not the name of the Lua file name that would show up in DCS. So when we load this, remember, we only did half of the DDS files in here. So I'm assuming as soon as I click load library, half of the plane is going to be red. And there you go. Okay. The rest of it, because we didn't work on it, is just the default DDS file. So again, that's how you work with templates, and you can do a lot of great things with templates. You can have, as many layers as you want to add onto it in your graphics engine, but it all gets exported down to the flat file. So the last thing that I want to talk about is rough met files. So I am going to load up the A10, okay, because I just recently started working with the A10 and I did some stuff with the rough met file. So shape, okay. So what I want to point your attention to, and listen, this is a little bit more advanced, okay, but you can control the shine of your paint using rough met. So if we look at this A10 that I designed, you can see that I went with more of a matte black finish and then went with a high gloss accent paint all around it. Okay, so how do we do this? If we go and open up that file, you'll notice that I have my straight up A10.1.dds, but then every one of these files also has a rough met file. Okay, I've loaded into my A10 Photoshop file, and if we look at this file, I have all of my various layers that made up the front of the aircraft. That's what we're looking at right now. This is the nose of the aircraft. But I also have over here, I have 3 folders, one called metallic, one called roughness, and one called clear coat. Okay, and the way that these work, if I double click on one of these layers, is the layer itself, I have my blend mode set to pass through, but each one of these folders only outputs one color, okay? And the color is, for this particular one is red, and whenever you put anything in there, it's basically the layers inside of that are just grayscale. So white being the extreme on one end, black being the extreme on the other, and then all the shades of gray in. And so the way that this works is that DCS looks at these as what is it doing with the paint that is on the aircraft. So red, I like to think of it as it's how well does it absorb shadows. So what I typically do with red, if I open up this particular layer, is I just keep this one as like it's all white. I don't want ambient inclusion being, like it's sucking in shadows, but if that's something that you're into and you really want to make, every single rivet on there, be able to have a darker shadow to it, by all means go through it. But for the most part, and what I've seen in the livery community is that they just leave this white. So the next layer is called roughness. And this is just my green channel. And what I think of this more is that the shine of the paint, okay? So if you go to one extreme, black, it'll be super, super shiny, like a fresh clear coat on a brand new car. And if you go in the opposite direction, that's where you get like super dull, almost like just complete chalkiness. And then in between is where you find that perfect balance of that matte finish. So for this particular paint job, I went with this gray color right here. And then right here on this section, I painted it pure black, which is the pure black gives you the shiniest clear coat color. So by doing that, when you export the rough matte file and then you put it into your library, we have to look at the Lua file now. When we look at this, we see that we have the regular paint file and we have the rough matte file. Now, let's talk through the Lua file real quick, okay? So what this is looking for, right? The Lua file puts together the expected DDS files all together to make up the aircraft library. And so this is saying that this is the section of the aircraft that it's looking for. And then this part right here is saying this is the name of my custom file. Now, if you had this set to true, then the library is going to ignore the fact that you have a custom file name here, and it's going to go out and it's going to grab the default library associated with this particular aircraft and put it in that place. If you don't want the default, then you have to set this to false. And the same, let's make sure we type things correctly. The same goes for your rough matte. Okay, so we have, this is the part of the plane that we want to apply the rough matte to. And then we have the name of our custom rough matte, and we have set this to false. False meaning do not go grab the default rough matte file and apply it to my library. Use this custom one that I have built. So because for this particular aircraft, every single file in here is custom, all of these are set to false, okay? And then again, at the very bottom, we have the custom name of the library that will show up in DCS. So the last thing that I just quickly want to talk about is when you are creating your rough matte files, just make sure that you are going and turning off all of the stuff that is like underneath the rough matte, unless you want it there, right? But really the rough matte and what the library is looking for is just those values of red, green, and blue, and the grayscale in between them. The other one that I didn't really touch on, because I haven't really used it very much, is the blue. And what the blue is looking for is essentially, you know, again, it's grayscale, and it's saying how metallic do you want this color to look versus like a dull rusty paint. I don't know. To be honest, I don't play with that too much. Somebody here will probably tell you exactly what it does. So again, look in the comments for that. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate you guys, and have fun making your libraries.